Welcome back to On Campus at SUNY New Paltz, and today my guest is Eddie Bell, and we've been talking all about his great book, little but great, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, and Do It Again.
Time to Lynch a Negro.
Time to Lynch a Negro. Yeah. And Eddie's going to read a poem right now entitled Atonement.
Yes, I selected this poem because it's really, a lot of the poems in here are in women's voices, and this poem's in a woman's voice, and this is the primary character in this is a mother of a young man that got lynched. Oh, and okay. She's reading it and kind of referring to a white mother of the lyncher.
Okay.
All right, so I'll read it. Atonement. I saw him. Lord showed me in a dream, him full of hate and fury, leading humanity held against desire, deep drive that raged, wanting the sacrifice to burn upon the altar, crowd anxious, ready to do something, even if it's wrong. I saw him. Eyes circles of red hell fire, plague-ridden phlegm spewing forth unnatural-like words, staccato, simple, directive. We come for that nigga, stand aside. I saw him, knowed him too, his mother's eyes tender behind the glaze. I cried for her and mightily prayed. Her son gave the devil a ride, now it's him driving. I cried for her. She's painting just like me.
Wow.
So that's, you know, there's some powerful black women that went through, you know, having those kinds of experiences, and to be able to feel empathy for another mother, because, you know, is a special thing. And I ran across that in my research.
Quite a raw poem. Beautiful, but very raw. It kind of, must say, brought tears to my eyes, which leads us to a couple of things. Well, Gwendolyn Brooks, are you familiar with her poetry?
Absolutely.
Yeah. The lynching, I forget the name of the poem now, but it's a great, great poem in which she talks about lynching, and the lynchy was our Lord is the ending of that poem, and that kind of reminded me as you were reading it. Beautiful reading also, Eddie, which has a lot to do with your performance art, as a performance artist.
By the way, I met Gwendolyn Brooks.
You did?
She did me a big service. I went to see her read at Cortland State and a few years back, and she gave me her address and things, and I sent her a poem, and she edited it for me and sent it back to me. I still have it, and she sent me 2 of her limited release books that she signed, and I'm just so happy to have them, especially since she passed.
You never know.
Wonderful woman. She lives in Chicago, you know.
Wow. Oh, that is exciting. That is really exciting. I would love to hear more and more poems. But let's talk a little bit about this Festival of Tears, the lynching project and the Festival of Tears. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, okay, Festival of Tears is the title given to the CD that records some of the poems from the book. And it was really done live at the Holland Cultural Center in Beacon, and then we recorded some in the studio, and it's done to music, and it's local jazz violinist Betty McDonald.
Oh, wow!
Had a lot to do with it. She was guiding me through the whole project, and also reads on the CD as well as plays.
Wow.
And then another violinist, Lisa Leonardi, who lives in Long Island, played, and then a local jazz bassist, Jim Curtin, plays on it. So,
you got jazz, classical, you got all that jazz.
Yeah, it's jazz, but the majority of the music on it is spirituals, some with a blues taste and some with a little bit of jazz taste, but it kind of adds another dimension to the reading of the poems, and it's really well done, not just because I did it, but it really is well done, and the musicians were just very, very excellent. And,
a collaboration.
And so it was a true collaboration.
But why, a couple of things I want to talk about. One is, why the title, Festival of Tears?
Well, because I kind of gerrymandered that a little bit. Lynchings were, there were lynchings that were anonymous, it just happened, and then there were lynchings called spectacle lynchings. and they were festivals. They were festivals because they were advertised and people were invited. And I'm working on now another project for gifted children and called A Timeline, and that follows a lynching from early in the morning until when it actually occurred. But at these spectacle lynchings, thousands of people came. They were advertised. People came on this particular one that I write about. It was a gentleman by the name of Sam Hose in Atlanta. It was in a place called Palmetto, Georgia, outside of Atlanta. And people came from Atlanta. They put extra cars on the train, and the newspapers advertised it. And there were somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 people that came to watch these lynchings. So I kind of borrowed that title, and instead of saying spectacle, I said festival, because there were vendors there, photographers, and lots of things. It was a big party. And I wrote a poem in the book about an old woman who was taken to one of those parties.
Who was taking? What do you mean?
Who was taken to a spectacle lynching as a child of 7 years old, and her father took her to one of these lynchings. And Gold Davis told me about this story, and I wrote a poem about that.
Is that a long poem?
Yeah, it's a little bit long, probably too long to read.
Okay.
But
well, we'll catch you at some performances.
Yeah, right. So I kind of borrowed Festival of Tears because yes, it was a festival, and if you ever see pictures of some of the postcards and things that were taken, people would look joyous, but it was also the people that affected, there were tears. So I kind of put that together, and that's the name. That's why I named the CD that.
And it's as it's listed, a dramatic presentation.
Yes.
So it's all this music with. Can't believe Betty McDonald. She's an old dear friend of mine, and that's just wonderful.
She's just super. She just performed with me recently.
Really?
Yeah, at the Howland Center. We had a reading there, and she was part of that also.
So that's Beacon, Poughkeepsie, Middletown. I have a
Liberty.
list. Liberty.
Yeah, I read all over.
And I see that you have some grants also.
Yeah. Well, I got grants because this was prior to this book, before this book. But my first book, Cap's Dreaming Chair, it was discovered by a French professor in Paris who teaches in Paris, a French teacher who was teaching English to French students. And she's French herself. And then anyway, long story short, they did a translation project, and they invited me over to Paris. I went 3 times. Wow. I toured Paris and central France, and the grants were travel grants from the French Ministry of Culture and from the New York State Foundation and Council on the Arts.
Oh, terrific. Yeah, I see New York State Council. Nice.
Yeah, so that helped me with the travel. Expensive to go overseas and maintain yourself. But those are wonderful experiences, too. And I interacted with students with my poetry. That was kind of family-based poetry, and we went around the country, and they would read, and I'd read in French, and I'd read in English, and they'd read in French, and we had a good time with that.
Wow, that really is.
Right. I'd like to go back sometime. I haven't, but I went 3 years in a row, and then I figured I better take a break.
I'm sure you will go back. With you, I knowing you, you'll make it happen. I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure. What is this poetry project, St. Mark's Church, New York City? What is that?
Well, St. Mark's Church is an old poetry event. They're doing all the way back to the Beats, and
back to the Beats.
Yeah, back to the Beats. And I've read there as a feature. When I was working in the city, I did features around the city. But I also, up until the last couple of years, they have a poetry marathon on New Year's Eve, and I've always been a reader at the poetry marathon. In fact, one year I opened it up, and so but that's a wonderful place to read just because of its history. It was an old church, but of course they do a lot of poetry there.
Yeah, it's right around the village.
It's
right in the village.
On 2nd Avenue and 10th Street.
Right. We're going to come right back for more, and there is so much more. Thank you. We'll be right back.